Prepare to experience the strongest radio allowable by law. Secrets will be revealed. Myths dispelled. From the studio gym where excuses never apply, it's Superhuman Radio with your host, Carl Lenore.
Welcome back to another episode of Superhuman Radio. Many of us who believe in being superhuman own pets. And unfortunately, some people out there are unaware of the damage they're doing to their pets, feeding them the kibble that is often recommended by their veterinarians. There are 470 million dogs worldwide, not counting cats, just dogs. And most of the owners love their dogs. In fact, some of them feel that they are an extension of the family. They're four-legged human. What if they knew that they were slowly killing their dog? And what if they knew what it was that was slowly killing them? Would they change? We've been talking about this now for 8 years. I did my first show on this topic 8 years ago with Peter Rouse when he was living in New Zealand. And we've done shows about this periodically because we want to acknowledge that nutrition is part of the disease process of the pets that are stewarded by the humans who develop diseases from their own lack of nutritional education. And I promise you today, if you really listen today, there's not going to be any excuses any longer. You're going to have to do something different if you really love your pet. I'm not questioning if you do, but I am telling you that if you really love your pet, something's got to change. Before we get started, we have to always thank our title sponsor, and that's Legendary Foods, makers of the Tasty Pastry, coming out in more delicious flavors. The new cake-style Tasty Pastry has 20 grams of protein, less than 1 gram of sugar. And you can get them by going to shrnetwork.biz/legendary and using the code SHR10. Elisa just sent me pictures of some of the new flavors that are available to you. Check them out. And of course, every day we give away boxes of free Tasty Pastries. Listen to the show. And during the commercial break, you'll hear a secret word. Email that secret word to onair@superhumanradio.net. Include your mailing address, and you can be one of the lucky winners. So pay attention. Now I'm going to bring my guest. We will probably be joined by one other guest, and that's Shawn Buckley. We have Dr. Oscar Chavez with us today. Welcome to the show, Oscar.
Hi. Thank you, Carl, for having me. Very glad to be here.
So yourself and Shawn just published a book called Big Kibble. And before we get into the book, I don't think enough people understand why we feed our pets kibble. So let's do a little history lesson. For decades, we fed dogs wet dog food. It was in a can. It was usually some byproduct of meat and fat and stuff like that. What happened to that food? Was that food bad for our dogs? Why did it go away?
No, actually, some of it was probably better than what we have today as kibble. So what happened was World War II, and our involvement in World War II started ramping up, and the tin and metal used to make the cans of all canned food. And at the time, dog food and pet food was actually outselling baby food. So the industry had already grown to be a substantial industry that used a lot of tin and a lot of aluminum and canning. And so there was a shift in all of the canning industry to do less canning and find other ways to package foods. And it was during that shift that essentially cereals and pet food and dry pet food as we know it today, and kibble, was invented as a solution to package it in a way other than having it canned, and also have long shelf life, which was important.
And then that was the real thing, right? So like when they came out with kibble, they were like, oh my God, this is shelf stable for 10 years.
Right, for multiple years, yeah, exactly, and they were able to add preservatives and chemicals to make it shelf stable for at least a couple years. Yes.
Now the process to make kibble, and I can't remember the doctor's name, but he is the doctor who also started was it Science Diet or Eukanuba or something like that? And we actually have Shawn Buckley here. Hold on, let's just bring him into this conversation. Hi, yeah, Shawn. How are you?
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. We're just taking a stroll down memory lane and remembering why we even feed kibble today. So Oscar was explaining. So what by heating the food to such a high degree and removing every bit of moisture, they discovered that, wow, this stuff lasts in a bag for years, right?
Correct. And even dry pet food, as we call it, contains 10% moisture. So they don't remove all the moisture, but they remove a substantial amount of it. Now, subsequently, we now have dehydrated pet food, which is almost completely void of any moisture. But that's a more recent development. But kibble itself contains about 10% moisture, but you're right. By removing the majority of the moisture and adding chemicals and preservatives, they're able to obtain the 2+ year shelf life. And I think during that time, that was a solution that also paralleled with the emergence of cereals and other packaged foods in the human industries as well. And so it was just a great solution for the industry, not so great if you're a dog.
And let's talk about why that is. So and Shawn, please feel free to jump in here. So when you remove almost all the moisture from these foods, and when you elevate the temperature that these foods are basically processed under, some nasty things happen to the food, and that we know that kidney function is damaged from eating these types of foods. Is it not true?
Even before that, Carl, I just want to add that when you take out all the moisture, there's another thing that happens that is very beneficial to very large multinational corporations that make kibble by the metric ton, and that is the cost of freight goes down. Now, that might sound like a minor thing, but in some of the really, really inexpensive, we'll call them low quality kibble brands, freight can be as expensive as any other category, like packaging or the actual cost of goods.
And that says something about the quality of the food. When the freight could actually be more than the cost of manufacturing food, people should be going, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense.
Right. And the other thing is, when you build a kibble factory, you're talking about well in excess of $100 or $200 million, because it's really not a food processing. It's not like a commissary kitchen or something. It's a factory. Like, if you close your eyes and went inside and looked around, and you may not even know what they're making. They could be making anything. You don't really see anything like, you're not going to see cuts of meat, in there, or it's a manufacturing process. So the point is,
but on the commercials, you see all those cuts of meat, right? I mean, arena,
Yeah, well, you do. Yeah. And that's a whole nother area of interest, because the rules and regulations around advertising, for example, our food. I used to own an advertising agency, and we did a lot of food, human food, and they're very strict. You can only show the things that you're actually delivering. So if you have a package and you have, say, some kind of beef barley soup, and you show a picture of a prime steak, there are experts at the USDA, FDA that can look at that picture and say, you're showing a picture of prime beef. If you're putting select in the can, then they're going to have you change that can. It's that strict. But those rules virtually do not exist and or are not adhered to in the pet food business at all. So you'll see, grilled chicken breast, and there's zero grilled chicken breast in the food. Zero. So it's very different.
Is everything changing now because people care more about their pets? Do you think that back in the day, a pet was, whatever they eat, they eat. Like we can't be bothered with that. But now people are really starting to understand the correlation between nutrition and disease, their own diseases. Are people starting to become more enlightened?
Yeah, I think the answer to that is clearly yes. The fastest growing segment within the pet foods is our segment, fresh whole food. So companies like ours, but competitors of ours like Farmer's Dog and Nom Nom Now and My Ollie and Open Farm and others, Pet Plate. There are more and more companies doing this because there's more and more demand.
So now let's talk about something else, Oscar, Dr. Chavez. So we have heard a lot about advanced glycation end products in humans because of type 2 diabetes, but also because we know that people who love to grill their steaks until they're crisp and burnt, we know that they're eating these AGEs, and our bodies are not equipped to get AGEs out of the system. So what happens when you put these foods in a kiln and heat them at such high heats that you want to extract 85% of the moisture? There's an accumulation of AGEs, right?
Right, Carl, and I'm so glad you're covering this. I think this is going to be, it already is a robust area of research in human nutrition. It's emerging as an area of research in pet nutrition. And the cool thing is there's more things we can do in the veterinary research world than we can do in the human world, just because you can control more factors. So I think we're going to learn a lot in the next 5 to 10 years about AGEs, but we already know a lot, especially for humans, as you say. And what we know is that proteins, fats, and carbohydrates will react under high temperature processing as a function of time. So the longer it's at high temperature and the more processing, the more AGEs. And you can't think of anything more ultra processed than kibble. That's all it is. As Shawn was saying, the ingredients don't come in as grilled chicken breast. It comes in as chicken powder and chicken meal. And it's a powder that goes into a mixing vat that mixes with other powders of, lentils and brown rice powder, et cetera, almost like a batter. And then that gets baked into the little ball that we all call kibble. And all of that is temperature and time. And so what happens to the proteins, carbs, and fats is that there's a Maillard reaction. And that Maillard reaction is exactly what you're describing. It's the burnt ends on your barbecue, right? It's delicious. It's fantastic. Once in a while, it's not going to kill you to have that. And now my relationship with food over the time that I've been doing this with Just Food for Dogs has changed. I look at anything that contains potential AGEs as, is that worth dying for? Because I'm going to die a little bit before having it. And sometimes, you know what? If it's been a while, burnt ends are worth dying for, right? So I get it. But the problem with pets is that you're feeding them that essentially heavy, laden with burnt ends kibble every single day as their only sustenance. So that is not healthy in any ways. And yes, they've already, in the veterinary world, we've already measured the amount of AGEs in dry food versus dehydrated food versus canned food versus raw. And it's exponentially high in the dry food, as you would expect, because again, a function of temperature and time.
No, I think
we're not hearing you very well.
Yeah, we're breaking up for us, Carl.
What about now?
Yeah.
There you go.
All right.
Okay. I have to move my mic. I talk loud to begin. I probably don't even need this mic to do this show. But anyway, we paid attention on this show to the role of nutrition and the etiology of human disease. And it's undeniable. But few doctors really get any nutritional advice or guidance in medical school. And I have to believe the same is true of veterinarians, because we are seeing our pets getting all the same diseases that their humans get: type 2 diabetes, cancer, kidney failure. I mean, nowadays, veterinarians offer the types of treatments that were only ever available to humans. What do veterinarians get any advice about nutrition in school, Dr. Chavez?
Yeah, so first let me start off by saying there are thousands of veterinarians that believe in our concept, and we are the number one vet brand with Just Food for Dogs, which is a company that Shawn and I are associated with. So we do know of thousands of veterinarians that have sort of crossed over to fresh whole food. But at the same time, you're right. The majority mainstream veterinarian is still under the belief that processed kibble, and especially the science brands like, you know, your Hills, your Royal Canin, your Purina, are the healthiest thing that you can give our pets. And that's simply not true. There's research already to show it, and there's more in the works. But there's just so many dollars of marketing and advertising and indoctrination that we talk about in Big Kibble. And this is a trigger. This whole conversation is a trigger for a lot of veterinarians, because they don't want to believe that those types of things skew their or cloud their judgment. And they do want to believe that kibble is healthy. And I know that I'm upsetting some of my colleagues out there by even saying this, but the reality is that just like it is for us to be healthier with fresh whole foods, the same thing is for our pets. Why would it be any different? They have a physiology that ages faster. They have a metabolism that is faster. If anything, they need it more than we do. And so there is no medical reason to believe that they can eat a little brown ball and be fine, whereas we can't. But yet it's hard to get vets to understand that, because you're going up against billions of dollars of advertising and indoctrination the other way. And also there's inertia. Vets have been recommending this way of feeding. I had been recommending this way of feeding until I sort of learned better, right? For so many years that it takes a lot to go back and go, you know what? No, that's wrong. Let me make a new recommendation. There's also another aspect, and that is there's a lot of different opinions about nutrition. Nutrition in veterinary medicine has become kind of like religion. What do you believe? Do you believe raw? Do you believe grain-free? Do you believe lentils are good? Do you believe lentils are bad? You know, so it's just become so controversial to even bring up the topic in a consult that some vets just want to like say, you know what, forget it. I don't really want to talk about nutrition, which is sad, because research shows that pet parents still look at their veterinarians for nutritional advice.
If
Shawn,
there's another way of looking at it is think about it like this, Carl. You brought up, you know, there's all these vets and they're getting this different training, and the pets are having, you know, experiencing the same disease. So, you know, we have board certified oncology, dermatology, internal medicine, toxicology. You have all these board certified specialty areas of medicine for dogs and cats, for these pets, because over the decades, they have gone from, as everybody likes to say, you know, from the backyard doghouse into the house, you know, onto your bed, you know, and they've become a much more important part of our families. They've actually become a four-legged member of the family, right? So what have we done to fix this problem? Instead of feeding them differently to begin with, we've created a lot of Band-Aids, really incredibly impressive Band-Aids, like a board-certified veterinary oncologist or a board-certified veterinary dermatologist. And we're still going to need them, absolutely. But their jobs would be made a lot easier if we'd also start feeding real food, so that we don't have to just keep fixing the problem that we created. And then the other thing that's so obvious but so powerful is that, you know, I decide what I'm going to eat, and you decide what you're going to eat, but our dogs and cats don't. So I can tell you, if Marty and Herman, my two dogs, if they got to feed me, there'd be no ice cream, there'd be no chocolate. It would only be the most healthy, because they love me and they more than life itself. So they would only give me the healthiest food. That's the position that we're in reverse. We can make them live a longer and happier life simply by feeding them the right way.
How big of an industry is pet food right now?
$31 billion for dog and cat food in the United States last year.
Only
the majority of that, only the United States. Yeah. 31 billion. And a lot of that is owned by, dozens of brands that are owned by 3 or 4 companies: Colgate,
right.
Palmolive, Mars, M&M, Mars, Nestle. Yeah. So, that's where you end up. That's where you end up with things like, an AFCO book with the official ingredients listing things like empty peanut shells and empty almond shells. Now, empty peanut shells and empty almond shells are, probably not going to kill your dog if they ate one, but there's no real genuine nutritional value in empty peanut shells and empty almond shells. But that ingredient was adopted, in the early 1970s by AFCO, and it still exists there. And as a pet food processor, which is technically what each of the manufacturers are, they can call that ingredient vegetable fiber, Carl. So you don't even know that it's an empty peanut shell. It's called vegetable fiber.
And obviously they're pulverized, right? They're pulverized into a powder?
Yes. Into a powder and mixed in. Yeah.
So when I went to school for optometry, and Bausch and Lomb outfitted all our labs. Bausch and Lomb threw seasonal parties for everybody. Bausch and Lomb did so many things for the school that when you went into private practice, a B&L sales rep came to you and says, "Hey, we'll outfit your whole business for you. We'll floor plan it. You just have to pay us $360 a month, and we'll put the inventory in. We'll put the machines in. We'll put the B&L Phoropters in." Is that what the dog food industry does in the veterinarian schools?
Yeah, absolutely. And so there is the, Purina Center for Nutrition at a vet school. And exactly the same way, there's the Hills Wing, at one of the most prominent vet schools in the country. And so you get exactly the same situation. And on top of that, they'll sponsor lectures, they'll sponsor continuing education, they'll provide free food for vet students while they're in school. There are clubs and associations, and so they're very ingrained into the education. And again, a lot of vets hate talking about this because they want to believe that it does not affect their judgment when it comes to these things. But the reality is, it does. That's the only way I can explain this stubborn commitment to essentially an unhealthy product.
Do you want to add to that, Shawn? Because I have another question for Oscar.
No, I think that Dr. Chavez covered that perfectly. That's exactly.
You're going to get me in trouble with my colleagues, Carl.
No, okay. We need to piss some people off because look, your book was given to me by a close friend of mine that I started talking to about Kibble years ago, and she got it. I mean, she understands it now. So we know that we vote with our dollars. If you want to see change in an industry, just spend your money differently. You watch how quick they respond. Right. Don't kid yourself. Purina and all these companies are out there trying to figure out how to do raw foods right now. They're already working on it because they see it. It's inevitable. People are onto us. We can't keep selling this stuff, so we have to be in front of it. You can, I guarantee that. But with that being said, there's another interesting aspect to this. So I am someone who eats what I consider an ancestral diet. I cook most of my food. I don't eat I eat very few things out of a package. And my relationship with food is one that is not typical compared to the average American. And Oscar, you said earlier that, when you look at the way people feed their dogs, it's kind of like the way they feed themselves. Their personal relationship with nutrition is emblematic of the foods they're going to buy for their dogs. And you put it very, very nicely when you said, if if a mom was feeding her child a meal every day that it costs 80 cents to make, she would say, oh my God, what's in that? But the reality is that that's how they feed their dogs, and they don't care, because chances are they don't really care about what they're eating either.
Correct. And I think it comes down to two things: your relationship with your pets and your relationship to food personally. And if those two things come together, then it's a no-brainer. Once you learn that processed foods and that kibble is toxic, essentially poison to your dog, you're going to get them off of that. But there's everyone in between. And what happens is, if some people are essentially poisoning themselves every day with packaged foods, and they don't really care about that, then why are they going to care about their pets as much? Now, having said that, I'm kind of a case study for going in that direction. So I used to definitely indulge in packaged foods. I weighed 45 to 50 pounds more than I do now. And it was this work that we are doing with Just Food for Dogs and Big Kibble that made me finally just swear off packaged foods. And I'm very much like you. I eat cooked whole foods. And since then, I've lost 50 pounds, kept it off, stayed active, and feel great. And so in my case, it was doing it for the dogs first that allowed me to learn to do it for myself. So that's sort of the shift that has to happen. Either you have to already do it for yourself, or at least appreciate doing it for your dogs and then do it for yourself. But yes, it all has to kind of come together for it to be a healthy lifestyle in the household. Sometimes we kind of think of this recommendation to go to fresh whole foods as not just a nutrition recommendation for your dog, but a lifestyle recommendation for you and your family.
What do you think, Shawn?
Oh, I couldn't have said it better myself. It's all part of an overall process, and it's some of it has to do with how much you care about your pets and if you see them as family, and as Oscar said, and in that sometimes you will see people that are themselves quite out of shape, but their dogs are actually in pretty good shape,
Right.
because the control is with someone else. It's with them for their dog. Again, I'd be a great health specimen if my pets got to decide what I ate, because they would only give me the best. Yeah, they would only give me the best.
I just want to plug the book real quick. So the book is called Big Kibble: The Hidden Dangers of the Pet Food Industry. You can get it one of two ways. You can go to shrnetwork.biz/Big Kibble, BIGKIBBLE. Or if you want to patronize Amazon, you can go to shrnetwork.biz/Big Kibble Amazon to get your copy of the book. I think if you own a pet, it's really required that you read this book, because if you really understand that every day when you that pet that you come home to every day, and no matter what you do in your life, that pet is there for you. They're happy to see you. They love you. They die for you. And you are feeding them something that's shortening their lives. If you can continue to look in their eyes knowing that, well, then that's the deal. But the reality is, now that you know, you really can't keep doing it. So we're going to talk about alternatives. We're going to get into that more. I also want to talk about carbohydrates. I just did a show last week that was a very large population study of over 100,000 people. And the paper determined that it is low quality, high glycemic index carbohydrates that leads to heart disease and stroke, not fats and not red meat. And this is a big one, because I think that if we look at dogs in their native habitat, how much carbohydrates are they really eating? I want to get into this. I want to get into the evolution of dogs in the wild. Stay tuned. We'll be right back with more Super. about the power of copper peptides here on the show. Now try it yourself with RestoraCell's amazing new skincare line built on the power of blue copper peptides. All natural, organic, made in the USA, and safe for sensitive skin. Save 30% on their Stem Cell Awakening Serum. Go to shrnetwork.biz/RestoraCell. That's RestoraCell and use code SHR to save 30% off. Remodel your skin today. The power of light can be truly life-changing and an important element for every superhuman. Because of this, I want you to experience the power of award-winning Saluma light therapy. Saluma utilizes NASA research technology to improve health at the cellular level and is cleared by the FDA to effectively treat a variety of pain, muscle, and joint conditions, as well as facial wrinkles and acne. Our entire team here at Superhuman Radio uses it. Its innovative shape-taking design allows for easy placement anywhere on the body. Choose from 13 different models. For an exclusive listener discount, go to shrnetwork.biz/Saluma. That's CELLUMA. And use code SHR10 to save 10% off of one of these award-winning devices. Every day, there's a new wellness trend. Eat that. Do this. Avoid those. How do you know where to start or who to trust? Inside Tracker helps you cut through the noise by analyzing your blood, your DNA, your lifestyle, and your fitness tracker to provide you with a science-backed, trackable action plan on how to live, age, and perform better. Personalized, one-size-fits-one recommendations to help you optimize you. For a limited time, Inside Tracker is offering Superhuman Radio listeners 25% off the entire store. Go to shrnetwork.biz/Inside Tracker, INSIDETRACKER, to save 25% off. Change begins on the inside. Visionary. Being superhuman means being conscientious about the choices we make. White Oak Pastures is superhuman when it comes to raising livestock. They're committed to animal welfare, land regeneration, and rural revival. They responsibly manage the entire process from the pasture to your doorstep. High-quality, pasture-raised, great-tasting meat from a farm you can trust. Full nose-to-tail selections. They even have options for your pet. Go to shrnetwork.biz/White Oak and use code SHR20 to save 20% off your entire first order.
This is the Superhuman Channel. Evolution just got kicked up a notch.
Welcome back. Changing it up a little bit so everybody gets some time in different areas of the screen. So I have to plug a sponsor. We actually have a sponsor. We have a sponsor called Visionary Pet Food. And they evolved out of a project that was funded by Ron and Shannon Penna, the founders of Quest Nutrition. And it came from the Kettle Pet Sanctuary. I don't know if either of you are familiar with this project at all, but they took dogs that were going to be euthanized because they had cancer. And they put them on a ketogenic diet. 0 carbs, high fat, high protein. And almost all of the dogs, I think they lost 2 dogs, and they've had literally hundreds. And I believe that they both still have 2 Vizslas that were from that project that they kept for themselves. And so when that project ended, they started a company called Visionary Pet Food. And I've got to read this, okay? It's the science is clear. Dogs should be powered by fat and protein, not carbs. That's why Visionary Pet Foods makes low-carb ketogenic dog foods for all breeds and life stages. And these are a variety of different foods, including freeze-dried patties and fresh raw and so on and so forth. Make the switch to Visionary today and give your dog a lifelong gift. And I'm going to put the link up here real quick. If you're interested in learning more about Visionary Pet Foods, low-carb keto pet foods for your dog, shrnetwork.biz/visionary. Now, the reason I'm plugging them right this minute in this segment of the show is because pet food manufacturers took it upon themselves to put carbohydrates in dog kibble. And usually it's like a cornmeal. They put some other stuff now, and some of the stuff is getting a little fancier. But around the time that kibble started including higher amounts of carbohydrates, we started to see dogs developing metabolic disorders. We know that labs and Labrador retrievers and golden retrievers die of cancer frequently. My sister had a Schnauzer that had frank type 2 diabetes with pancreatic failure that they had to give insulin to, and they continued to feed the same kibble, which was high in carbohydrates. What is the role of carbohydrates in a dog? I mean, if we look at dogs in the wild, a wolf, where is he getting his carbs from? Or is that a bad analogy? You tell me.
Yeah. So we could break that question down a little bit, but first of all, I do think that thinking of our dogs in the wild as a wolf is a bad analogy. For example, I have a golden retriever. His name is Bruce. If I let him go in the forest, he would have his tail between his legs and he would be shaking, waiting for me to come back for him, right? He's not going to go join a pack. So there's no such thing as a dog in the wild in the sense that people like to use it for marketing for the ancestral diet. If you do want to see a domesticated dog in the wild, go to a third world country. And you would see them roaming the streets, and what do? They scavenge on the trash of what humans throw out, and in large in part is old produce and carbohydrates and things like that. And there is a good article that came out in Nature in 2014 that showed that domesticated dogs, have changed their genetics to adapt to a more carbohydrate rich diet. So in other words, they now match in their genetics more to us than wolves. So while there is this tendency to compare the domesticated dog back to a wolf, the reality is that that's not a fair comparison. They're more like us with respect to nutrition than they are with wolves. Now, having said that,
okay, go ahead.
Yeah. Good. Having said that, there are different qualities of carbohydrates, and I completely agree with you. Highly processed, refined carbohydrates are not good for us, and they're not good for them, and that's what's in the kibble. And that absolutely contributes to metabolic disease. Again, it's carbohydrates, fats, and proteins that come together in that Maillard reaction to form AGEs. And you can't do that without the carbohydrate. So you can do it with either proteins and fats, but you need to have that carbohydrate base. It's part of the reaction. And so when you are processing carbohydrates is when you're starting to get the breakdown. But there are healthy carbohydrates that are whole foods that can help diminish your reliance on protein and fat in certain situations. So for example, as dogs get older, and especially if they develop diseases like kidney disease or liver disease, they actually need a modest protein diet because the liver and the kidney process protein. And if they're sick or ill, then you don't want them to be processing more protein, right? Or high protein diets. And so you want to put them on a modest protein diet. And you can't do that unless you have carbohydrates because you have to get your calories from somewhere. So to answer your question of where carbohydrates, what the role is in pet food, healthy whole food carbohydrates can play a substantial role in providing calories without having to rely on protein and fat in a more balanced diet.
What do you think, Shawn?
Yeah, I think it's when I hear the wolf part, it makes me think of certain TV commercials, and I think Oscar's got it right. It's a marketing thing. People want to think of their dog as a wolf. But as he pointed out, I think it was 3 or 4 years ago. Even though for decades we've sort of known that dogs are dogs and they're not wolves and they're not the same as wild dogs or wolves or coyotes. We did, it wasn't proven until the journal Nature, which is one of the most prestigious scientific journals that exists, was able to prove that. And so, as of then, we are able to say without a shadow of a doubt that they're two different animals.
Okay. So when people start to think about feeding their dogs, right now, somebody's got a big bag of science diet. They probably paid $40, $50 for it, and they're working their way through it. And we're telling them you're poisoning your dog. So I've been told that when you transition a dog from kibble to whole raw foods, you have to do it slowly. Dogs have a microbiome just like humans do. We know if we change our diet dramatically, we end up with the runs and, and all that sort of stuff. So can someone safely go, okay, I'm going to give this a try. Instead of putting 4 cups of the kibble in the dish, I'm going to put 2 cups, and then I'm going to mix in some ground chopped meat and maybe some kale. Is that a good way to start?
Well, the one thing I would say, I mean, Oscar's a professor in nutrition for small pets, and I'm not. But what I would say is, once they're on a whole food diet, they can switch around. We've seen this a lot where they'll go to this diet and that diet and so on. Where they don't end up having these digestive issues that you're talking about, Carl, because you're 100% right. They kind of have to detox. It's a little bit of a detox from a kibble, the highly processed kibble, over to whole food. The other thing I would say is just for what we see is, and you're mentioning raw, we're not big fans of raw. We prefer a diet. We believe that the best thing to feed pets is at least dogs a lightly cooked food, so that it's easier to digest, and any pathogens are also cooked out. So the food that we see that in research that really does work the best, what we would call proven healthy, because it's had enough research behind it to be able to, and peer reviewed and published, to be able to call it proven healthy, is lightly cooked as opposed to raw.
Okay. All right. And what do you think, Oscar, about my question?
Say again. Sorry, I broke up.
What do you think about that question? I mean, as far as integrating some of the kibble that's left over with maybe, are you not a fan of raw at all? Raw meats?
So raw is going to be better than kibble. So if that's what you start putting in there, then that's great. But I'm with Shawn. I think that if you can take care of the bacterial issue by just cooking it, and what he means by lightly cooking is as you would in your own kitchen, right? We don't lose nutrition by cooking our food. And so this idea that you're going to lose all the nutrition if you cook it, it's just not true. You can go ahead and lightly cook it the way you would food for yourself. And that's going to be vast improvement to the high processing and ultra processing of kibble. And it will get rid of the pathogens. So I agree with that. I think there's research to show, and we talk about this in the book, that just fortifying the kibble with fresh whole foods. So you mentioned kale, that's a great idea, or real pieces of meat will help reduce dogs' chances for certain illnesses. So they did a study with schnauzers and bladder cancer, and they found that dogs that had their food fortified with some whole foods had a lower risk of bladder cancer. And so there is a benefit to just adding some. Now, if that's all you did, would just fortify the kibble with some fresh whole foods, you'd be a little bit better off, but you wouldn't get the full benefit of switching over to a whole food diet, but you would be a little bit better off. And that's what I would recommend if someone is just wanting to sort of get some of the benefit. But if you wanted to go to a complete whole food diet, then what you need is to balance that recipe properly to make sure it contains all the nutrients that dogs need, right? And so you wouldn't want to do that by just putting cooked whole foods in a bowl and serving it, because that might not provide all the nutrients they need for in a day. And so what happens is over a year or two of time, then later you might get some severe deficiencies like calcium, phosphorus, brittle bones, etc. Right? And so what we recommend in that case is in the book we have recipes that you can follow, and they call for a nutrient blend that you can add to it to make sure the diet is balanced for long-term feeding. You can also work with your veterinarian or veterinary nutritionist to develop a recipe that you can balance at home. So that's what you would need if you are going to do this long-term and feed fresh whole foods exclusively. You need a balanced diet, and of course we also work with a company that makes those diets as well.
Yeah, and I would say the one thing I like to point out to people is that, because they kind of roll their eyes and say, well, I don't even make food, for myself every day. I can't cook for my dog.
That's the problem.
But But here's it's an easy problem to fix though, because depending on the size of your dog, you can make 2 weeks or a month's worth of food all at once and put it in Ziploc bags and put it in the freezer, because that's the preservative. That's the best preservative, is your freezer. And you pull it out, it's a day's worth of food, you thaw it out and you feed it to your dog. It's about as simple as it gets. And yeah, you've got to make it once a month, but it's vastly better. And then you're not really buying dog food from anybody, the company we're associated with or anyone else. You're just making it at home. And we firmly believe that in 10, 20 years, this is going to become much, much more common, that people are going to make big batches of it, of whatever works for them and their pets, and put it in the freezer, store it there, pull it out, feed it to them. And there you go. The notion of this apparatus, this massive $31 billion apparatus, business apparatus of creating a burnt little ball and putting it, in a bowl, and somehow dogs are magically, the only animal in the animal kingdom that should eat a burnt little ball. I honestly think that's going to go away. I really do.
So funny you say that. I told Oscar this off the air. So we were doing a show about pet foods several years ago. Rodney Habib had come on, and I mentioned to Rodney that I had read that the grizzly bear at the San Diego Zoo was suffering from congestive heart failure. And it turns out that they mentioned that several of the animals at the San Diego Zoo had human diseases like type 2 diabetes and all these other issues. And lo and behold, they all eat some sort of chow, bear chow, deer chow, gazelle
monkey
chow.
chow. Yeah.
Monkey chow. And it's like, oh my God. So all these poor animals are being fed these artificial diets and dying from the same diseases that people do. And we've been eating artificial diets for decades now. And we have all these diseases. And it's like, oh my God, you have to be, I'm sorry to say this, you have to be stupid not to make this connection that it's this food that we're feeding them.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Now that is, when you talk about monkey chow, and there really is monkey chow.
Oh, I know. I know. There's bear chow too. They have bear chow. Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't know about the bear chow, but monkey chow, yeah. So, then you can, in a case of a monkey or a bear, you have every right to say, okay, what would they be eating in the wild? Because to the best of my knowledge, the journal Nature has never revealed that there's a various versions of bear, the ones that live, not yet anyway. Polar bears, probably only decades away, because, they're eating out of trash cans too, for different reasons. But it's crazy, the connection. It's so obvious. It's so obvious.
Oh, I lost you again.
I lost you, yeah.
Test.
Yep, that's better.
Back.
Yeah.
We're going to take a break. We'll be right back with more. Stay tuned.
Yeah.
As a listener of this show, you know how important your gut is to your overall health. Bioptimizers has a potent product to heal and repair your gut unlike anything else. It's called Leaky Gut Guardian. It's powered by patented IGY Max, an egg-based protein that enhances gut health, reverses antibiotic damage, and strengthens your immune system. Available in 2 delicious powders, vegetarian vanilla and chocolate carnivore. Simply mix it with your favorite beverage. Repair your gut and power up your immune system risk-free and save 10% off. Go to shrnetwork.biz/leaky gut. Don't delay. Fix your gut today. Visionary.
New Mass Pro Synthogen X2 just upped its own legendary game. To distance itself even further from the rest of the pack, Synthogen X2 now has double the key active ingredients. If you've ever wondered what steroid-like recovery feels like, Synthogen X2 delivers. See why others compare it favorably to powerful bodybuilding drugs at synthogen.com. Mass Pro Synthogen. When you train with it, you'll gain with it.
Do you remember those delicious toaster pastries you had when you were a kid? You know, the rectangular sugar-filled snacks? Well, guess what? Legendary Foods has just made low-carb toaster pastry. This is the first of its kind, and honestly, these things are amazing. They have 3 to 4 net carb, less than 1 gram of sugar, and 9 grams of protein. You can eat them right out of the wrapper or lightly toast them. The only question is, which flavor? Strawberry or brown sugar cinnamon? They're available at eatlegendary.com and Amazon. Whether your goal is to build muscle or burn fat, you'll find everything you need at Redcon One. Need help getting a good night's sleep? Try Fade Out, or the most popular pre-workout supplement on the market today, Total War. Sign up for their new Transformation Challenge and win $10,000. Or shop for apparel that people at the gym will know that you are serious about your training. Need a testosterone booster that works? Check out Boomstick. Whatever you need, you'll find the best quality supplements on the market at Redcon One. Go to redcon1.com. That's REDCON, the number 1.com, or go to superhumanradio.net and click the Redcon One banner ad today. TaylorMade Health is focused on making sure you're able to perform and look your best. They are a leader in game-changing supplements and cosmetic products. Whether you want to increase strength, expedite recovery, facilitate soft tissue repair, or reduce deep wrinkles, TaylorMade Health has you covered. TaylorMade Health is also the home to Dr. Seed's products such as BPC, BPC Plus, and the Chill Pill. All of my listeners can now get 20% off their first order with code TRY20. That's TRY20. This code can even be used on subscription orders. Visit shrnetwork.biz/try20 today and use code TRY20 for 20% off your first order.
Move over, superheroes. This is the Superhuman Channel.
Hey, welcome back. I just want to mention something, too. When I was about 18 years old, maybe I was 17, I'm an avid hunter, and I was back then as well, and I wanted a hunting dog. I wanted a dog I could hunt with. And so I bought a Hungarian Vizsla. This is back in 1979, before they became so popular. Now you see them all over the place. And I bought them from a breeders up in New Jersey. The last name was Norton. The wife was from Hungary. And they bred Hungarian Vizslas. And my dog, Theron, I named him Theron because the constellation Theron is the hunter. The mythology story about Theron was all the men were killed in his village, so he had to hunt for all the women and children. He did it every day successfully. So I thought, I'm going to have a hunting dog. I want him to be blessed with good hunting skills, so I named him Theron. And so she sold me the dog because he was all the dogs in his group, his lineage, were all show dogs. In fact, he was by Champion Hooner, which was like this champion Hungarian Vizsla. They sold him to me because he was monorchid, and so he could never show, and so I could hunt with him. But she made me promise. I had to go up and interview with them 3 times. And every time she told me, she says, you can only feed him raw chopped meat and cooked rice. That's it. And he lived to be 20 years old. And at 20, he looked like a puppy. He was active. And so I never knew it. When, now that this unfolds, I look back and I think, gee, maybe that raw meat actually did something good for him and made him live longer. And obviously, white rice isn't the best carbohydrate, but it's better than some of these other processed things. So just an interesting story.
Yeah, and rice is actually
the white rice is probably enriched. So, if it was enriched,
enriched white rice, as we know it, is actually a pretty good quality carbohydrate. It's an expensive ingredient, if you want to call it that, in the pet food industry. And most of the pet food industry doesn't use real rice. They use what we call broken rice, which is sort of the leftovers of the byproduct of harvesting rice for us, right? But rice itself, as you and I know it, is actually an excellent pet food ingredient. And it just gets a bad rap because most people associate it with broken rice or processed rice, which I wouldn't recommend. Yeah.
There's a lot of that.
I'm sorry.
I was just going to say there's a lot of that. There's rice, like Oscar said, that we eat, and then there's sort of rice, in air quotes.
Right.
And that
Real right.
and that exists with chicken and different cuts of meat. And really, it's the things that we call ingredients in pet food is almost always a very distant, broken down byproduct, second cousin of, so chicken isn't really chicken. It's allowed to be beaks and feathers, and because if you go to a processed, house today, Carl, and you say, okay, they're processing lamb today, right? They don't say this many lamb chops are going to go to Kroger and this many lamb chops are going to go to Purina. I mean, there's 0 lamb chops going to a pet food company. 0. Right. It's all hoof, hide, hair. It's all the things that humans don't eat, and only the things that humans don't eat. You won't even find beef tongue in pet food because while I personally don't eat it, people eat beef tongue, and and therefore they are way better off selling it through that channel than they are the pet food channel.
So we have a lot of questions we're going to run through as quickly as possible. The first one is from Robert Thompson. He says his boxer died of kidney failure. He was feeding him vet-recommended Diamond dog food. Diamond contains ingredients sourced from China. Melamine was used by China back then at the time. A coincidence. So he's asking, do you think there was melamine in the food that damaged his dog's kidneys? Any opinions?
Yeah, I mean, so first of all, I'm sorry that happened. There were thousands of dogs that unfortunately died during the 2007 recalls. We talk about it in the book. And we also use it as an example. There's a whole chapter on the globalization of the supply chain of pet food. And so what happens is when a few key ingredients, in this case, it was wheat gluten, are used by multiple pet food companies and brands, and they source it from a few key suppliers in China, then when there is a problem, it leads to the biggest recall in American history in consumer goods, right? And that's what happened. And so if it happened around that time, then unfortunately, there's a chance that could have been the issue. Unfortunately, there's a chance it could have been 100 other chemicals and issues with the kibble. Starting with the fact that it is kibble and high in AGEs. And we know AGEs accumulate in the kidneys, the heart, and the liver, also the blood. One of the most famous AGEs, Carl, is hemoglobin A1C. So hemoglobin A1C is literally the blood parameter that doctors use to see if you're pre-diabetic. If it's creeping up, then they start saying you're pre-diabetic. If it goes to a certain level, then you are diabetic. So they use it as a marker of diabetes, but no one's ever asked until recently, well, what is it? What it is a glycosylated hemoglobin. So hemoglobin reacting with sugar and that building up in the blood. And you only get that from ingesting AGEs, and they accumulate in tissues. And so that it could be from feeding kibble. It could also be from feeding painted kibble, but both can have that same result.
And I've heard that just kibble in and of itself damages or slowly damages the kidneys of both cats and dogs that eat it.
Well, yeah, there's another factor. It's that you're chronically dehydrating your dog and cat, right? So I have now come to I'm always recommending against kibble, but now it's I don't even give people a chance to consider it with their cat. Cats have a high protein diet. They have an entirely different metabolism than dogs. They need a lot of protein, which means their kidneys need to get rid of excess protein, and they have to be well hydrated. You have no business feeding a cat a kibble. It should always be at least a canned diet or a moist wet diet.
Tommy D says, ever since your show with Dr. Karen Becker many years ago, I switched my golden retriever Hank to a raw meat, egg, sardine, veggie diet. Best decision I ever made, and heard it first here on Superhuman Radio. Thank you very much for saying that. Chris Bowles also says, switched our lab to raw diet several months ago. Robert Thompson has an interesting question. What are professional dogs fed? Racing greyhounds, fighting pit bulls? I got to believe they're eating kibble.
No. So a lot of the show dogs and racing dogs will eat. This sounds kind of gross, but there's actually websites that cater to it. What we call 4D meat. So 4D meat is dead, diseased, decaying, and disabled. So it's a form of raw food. What a lot of people mistake raw for is they think that feeding raw, unless they're making it themselves at home, they think that feeding commercial raw is the same as feeding a USDA inspected and approved meat at home that has been cooked, but they're just leaving it raw. And the reality is that there's an entire industry in the raw world that relies on getting rejected meats from slaughterhouses that just didn't make it into the food chain for whatever reason. Maybe that cow was riddled with, liver flukes or whatever, and so they have to condemn the carcass.
Bovine encephalitis,
BSE or whatever. And so now what they do is they take that, it's called 4D meat, and there is a market for it, and that is a way to obtain lower cost raw ingredients. And a lot of the performance pets will have that kind of meal, sometimes mixed with offal as well.
Right.
Yeah. If you're,
I just want to correct. You mean offal, the intestines?
Yeah. Okay. Right. OFFAL. Yep.
Yeah.
So I was going to say that your viewer that commented that they're feeding raw, it sounded like at home. If you're a fan of raw, that's the way to do it, because then you bought it at the grocery store, and so it's human grade. There is a vast difference between the human grade and the 4D meats, or what's called feed grade sometimes, that Dr. Chavez is talking about. And it has to do not just with how the cow or the animal came to die, but also how it was handled, transported, in the chain of custody, thereafter. So.
Uh-oh. Hope we didn't lose the internet.
Well, I think it might be Shawn, because I'm still here. But one thing I would also add for your viewer that asked that question is, I wouldn't mistake that because they feed performance dogs, and he made an example of a fighting pit bull, right? Which I don't know if that's even legal, but just because they feed performance dogs a 4D meat diet, I wouldn't go modeling your pet's diet after that. Performance when it comes to dogs is very different, and animals, and even horses, for example, is very different than like an athlete, right? For an athlete, we want them to perform. A human athlete, we want them to perform, but we also want them to live a long, healthy life. So there's a balancing act there. Unfortunately, even in the racing industry, for horses and dogs, they're just trying to milk as much performance out of that dog in the short period of time that they have, and then they'll retire it to a rescue, right?
6 years.
If they're lucky. Yeah, if they're lucky. So
I worked on the racetrack as a kid.
Right.
I dropped out of high school and I went to work at Aqueduct, Belmont, Saratoga. 6 years is all they care about for a horse's life, unless it's breeding stock. If it's breeding stock, but they'll take a horse that's 5 years old and do all sorts of horrible things, like freeze their legs and shoot them with all sorts of equipoise and stuff like that, just to get him to a claiming race for $10,000 where he'll be sold for $10,000. And those horses are just treated horribly. 6 years is all they care about for horses. Yeah, it's very sad. Yep. Very, very sad. This is an interesting question, because I want to know the other end. Is oral care required when feeding fresh whole foods? How about, who the hell is draining anal glands in the wild?
Yeah. Well, those are two separate issues on opposite ends of the dog, right? But here's what I'll say. So you're naturally speaking, and this is from years of experience of examining dogs that are in both types of diets. We also have on our team a residency trained dentist, a veterinary dentist. And so this is modeled after her recommendation as well. And that is, you're going to be much better off in your dog's oral health with the whole food diet, because we already know from research that it helps boost their immune system. a better way to put it is you're not suppressing their immune system with kibble. So as soon as you take them off the kibble and put them on fresh whole foods, their immune system is going to be functioning better. And all dental diseases, bacterial overgrowth in the mouth. And so if their immune system is functioning better in all of their body, it's also functioning better in their mouth. So you're going to have better oral health, but you can never replace, with domesticated dogs, you can never replace the benefit of daily brushing. And when I was in vet school, they would say at least recommend 3 days a week brushing. But since I graduated in vet school in 06, my same vet school did research that showed that actually when you do 3 days a week versus every day, there's such a high jump in the in the oral integrity of the mouth that really we shouldn't be recommending 3 days a week. We should only be recommending daily brushing. And as pet parents, and I can relate, we all wish there was just a magic bullet for oral health for our dogs. We wish it was different than our own oral health, but the reality is, just like many other things, it's no different. Just like we need to brush at least once or twice a day, they should be brushed at least once a day as well. No matter what food they're eating.
Shawn, you want to weigh in on that?
Oh, nothing to add to that. I mean, like as Oscar said, it's, we have access to one of the veterinary dentists essentially, and so his knowledge on that is pretty keen.
I also want to dispel the myth that feeding kibble is going to do a mechanical, function of breaking down tartar. A lot of people believe that about kibble, that it's better for the oral health because they're crunching. It's immunosuppressive, it's processed foods, and we've all eaten Cracker Jacks and gotten, pieces stuck in our teeth. And I can tell you from doing dentistry on dogs that sometimes I'm pulling out chunks of what essentially is old kibble out of these dogs' mouths. So there's absolutely nothing to dry food being good for the teeth.
So Patrick Rogers is a friend of mine. He's a Renaissance man. Patrick processes a cow or two every season. He grows his own vegetables. He's a great guy. He says, I make all our own dog food, canning meats and such. Then I just get a jar off the shelf and feed it. I have even been known to eat it myself. That's pretty cool. So let me get to Jim Slade says, my dog eats the same stuff I do, so she's keto. Michael Nippert says, my cat died of kidney disease, took him a couple of the years to slowly die, breaks my heart to this day. And obviously he's probably feeding him kibble. This is where I learned about your book. Michelle Hill is a friend of mine, and she said she recently read your book. It was a game changer, and that she'd like to get a copy for her vet. What about that? What about people walking into their vets and trying to teach the vet? If it's the same thing as a doctor, they don't want to hear anything. They know everything already.
Yeah, it's tough. And like I said, for the majority of vets, it's still a trigger because people will research on their own and feel like they know better. And in many cases, sometimes they do with respect to nutrition, and the veterinarian gets defensive. Having said that, we have helped transform the minds and practice of thousands of veterinarians. So the tidal wave is coming in the right direction. It's just that it's happening a little bit slower than we all think. The consumer's ahead of the veterinarian. Where we are right now, Carl, is like smoking in the 50s, right? Where you had magazine covers that had the doctor in the white coat smoking a menthol saying those are healthier than the regular cigarettes, right? We still have doctors in white coats pushing kibble, thinking it's still healthier when everyone else is starting to realize it's not. And what's really going to change the tide is what happened with smoking, is the release of research going the other way. And, we're fortunate enough to be involved in some of that. We'll talk about it in the book.
So this is hilarious. So Robert Thompson, the beauty of smartphones, is at the park now, listening to the show. The sign says, do not feed the geese. Human food will make them sick. Right on. It's like, even the geese have to eat the pellet food. You know what I mean? You put the quarter in, you get it, and you throw it to them. I mean, it's all garbage. All pets are not eating any healthy diets today. I mean, it's just sad. Really, really sad.
Yeah.
Last comment. I just get the cheaper cuts from the butcher for my dog when I'm buying my meat. Works out similar in price to commercial pet food anyway.
Yeah, it's not a bad idea.
And it's hard. Yeah. I understand, like when you said I got to brush my dog's teeth every day. Oh, come on. Now, but really, I mean, don't get me wrong. I look at Weston A. Price's information, his early research, and about oral health and whole food diets. I know a little bit about coy dogs, coyotes, and wild dogs in general. I know that nobody is expressing their anal glands. I know that nobody. I mean, a buddy of mine and I, we were hunting last year, and we shot a coyote because there's a big problem in upstate New York with coyotes right now. They're attacking people, and this coyote was probably 10, 11 years old, had perfect teeth. So I got to believe that what the coyote is eating is good for their mouth. And there's emerging research now. We've done shows on the changes seen in facial bone structure from people who eat soft food versus hard food, where you got to really chew stuff. And I think you're spot on about the idea that people think that feeding kibble is good because it has this abrasive quality. It's not abrasive. It turns into mush, and it gets caught in the gums, and it gets impacted underneath the gums, and it causes all sorts of problems. And whole foods don't do that. But right. I have to come back to this question, Dr. Chavez. Why are domesticated dogs having to have their anal glands expressed?
Great question. And I'm glad you got brought back to that, because I did want to answer that. So really, it comes down to obesity. So feeding these processed foods and these highly refined carbohydrates, as you talked about earlier, is leading to weight gain. And what happens is the anal glands sit right towards the opening of the anus. And when a dog defecates, it will naturally push the anal glands, and they will express as they fill. But what happens when they gain weight is that fat pockets will line those anal glands, and they'll make it so that essentially as the feces is coming through, it just glides right over it. It's like you don't miss, it just completely misses it anymore. And so now what vets have to do is they have to put on a glove, put their finger in there, and essentially find it. It's almost like a grape. Yeah, you got to find it because it's so tucked away behind fat pockets that you have to then express them. And that's why they're getting impacted. It is, I think, a nutritional issue based on the fact that they're eating these processed diets. It's like all the problems that obese people get. Obviously, they have their list of problems. This is one on the list of obese dogs.
Stop killing your dog. If you want to kill yourself, do it, but don't kill your dog, because your dog can't go to the refrigerator and pick what he or she wants to eat.
It also lives shorter already. They don't live long enough.
Yeah. So let me just put this up one more time. So if you want to get the book, it's called Big Kibble, Hidden Dangers of the Pet Food Industry. If you have a dog, you should read this. If you have a cat, you should read it too. You can get it one of two ways. shrnetwork.biz/Big Kibble, BIGKIBBLE. Or if you want to patronize Amazon, shrnetwork.biz/Big Kibble Amazon. Go check it out. Really, you know what? You've heard the message here today. If you can, in good conscience, continue to feed your dog kibble, then at least be honest and say, I really don't care that much about you, Fido. At least be honest about it, because that's really what you're saying in action. That's it. Thanks for being here, guys.
Thank you, Carl,
for having us.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
All right, so tomorrow I don't have a show, but Friday we have a show with Bioptimizer. We hope you can make it then. Thank you for being here. Please share this show. Help save someone's dog or cat. And we'll see you Friday with more Superhuman Radio. Take care.